PLA, which is an acronym for Pigmented Lesion Assay. And this uses a smart sticker technology to collect a sample non-invasively from a pigmented lesion. I am going to hand it over to John and Kevin momentarily, and they'll spend a few minutes just providing a refresher or an introduction to the story for those who are new to DermTech. And then with the time left, we'll try to talk a little bit about the outlook for 2021, ask some follow-ups on existing and pipeline initiatives, existing products and product pipeline initiatives. And then if we happen to have any time, we may go through some model loose ends. John and Kevin, thanks again for taking the time. And why don't I hand it over to you, John?
Great. Thank you, Doug. We really appreciate the opportunity to participate in the Cowen Conference. Cowen's been great supporters of what we're doing, so we're happy to be here today. I'm just going to go through a few slides that kind of just give folks a general background about what DermTech is doing and what we're all about. This is our standard disclaimer language that we put at the beginning of all of our discussions. The first thing I always like to point out about DermTech is we've really put together a fantastic team. This team has been working together for a long time now. Some have been together for 4 or 5 years. Some of our recent ads have been here for about a year and a half. They hail from companies like Allergan and Dexcom and Insight. They've really brought the company to where we are today, and we are really well positioned with this team to scale the company into the future. And we really have a broad mission here that this team is going to deliver on, which is transforming dermatology with our non-invasive skin genomics platform. And it allows us to democratize the access to high-quality dermatology care and really improve the lives of millions. And you'll understand why we say that here shortly. We are currently focused on skin cancer with our genomics test. We have a non-invasive platform. What we mean by that is we can collect a sample of skin using an adhesive patch. It feels a lot like Scotch tape. And on that adhesive patch we call a smart sticker, we can perform a variety of genomic analysis that allow us to assess what's going on in the skin. We're commercial stage, and we offer our first product, which is for enhancing the early detection of melanoma. We call it the Pigmented Lesion Assay, or PLA. We offer that in all 50 states through our CLIA and CAP certified laboratory that's based here in San Diego. And just in the last year, although COVID created some headwinds for us, we really began to commercially scale up the company because we received a Medicare coverage policy and a new CPT code for the test with very favorable reimbursement. And that occurred in February of last year. Despite those headwinds, as you'll see through our discussion today, we're making significant progress on the adoption of this test and the expansion of our pipeline opportunities with the platform. We like to say we fit in this unique class of genomics companies that are fundamentally changing the way medicine is practiced. All of these companies on this slide here are really making medicine more accurate, less invasive, and less expensive. And this is a privileged crowd to be part of, but we feel we fit in this with our non-invasive genomics platform and the massive market opportunities that we address with this platform. This is fundamentally what we're doing. It's about bringing skin cancer diagnosis into the 21st century. For a long time, if any specialty has been based more on art than science, it's dermatology. And dermatologists rely on a subjective visual assessment, often followed by a surgical biopsy and a subjective histopathology assessment. And the current paradigm here is really subjective, low accuracy, invasive, and high cost. And what we're fundamentally doing at DermTech is flipping this paradigm on its head and bringing the future with our non-invasive platform, where we collect a sample with an adhesive patch that comes to our central laboratory where we perform the genomic analysis. And within about 3 days, we can report back to the dermatologist on what's going on in the skin. And so this whole paradigm now becomes objective, highly accurate, non-invasive, and low cost. We have a deep pipeline of products that we're working on. This is initially our skin cancer vertical. We are branching out into inflammatory diseases. We can discuss about that later. But Our first product is the melanoma product, giant market opportunity, 4 million surgical procedures to diagnose melanoma in the US each year. We're introducing a second generation product here shortly that enhances the performance of our initial first generation product. Coming up next, we're working on a product we call the Illuminate, which assesses UV damage and skin cancer risk in normal appearing skin. We think that's the future. Most companies have been focused on early detection in this space, but the future is going to be pre-cancer detection. And that's really exactly what this Illuminate test does. We're also working on a test for the most common of all skin cancers. That's basal and squamous cell skin cancer. We call that our carcinome product. That's an incredibly large market opportunity because there are about 4.5 million of those cancers diagnosed in the US each year, and about 12 million surgical procedures to diagnose those cancers. And lastly, we have some pilot work going on in cutaneous lymphoma, which is not a common condition, but is often confused with inflammatory diseases of the skin, and it's a real challenge to diagnose. So we think we can bring some real value to that diagnostic pathway. As I mentioned, these are very large market opportunities. All in total, we think we can address just in the US about $10 billion worth of market opportunity. So we're excited to begin to penetrate these giant market opportunities. I'll just finish with some recent highlights. We've had a lot of good progress in the last year. We completed most recently an equity financing totaling $143 million in gross proceeds. We're now well capitalized to seize the opportunities before us. We've really begun to expand our commercial organization so that we can effectively address the professional dermatology market. We also released some important clinical data, a very large study we called the TRUST study that confirmed our high negative predictive value. That's a key metric in the performance of our test. It's about as good as it gets in medicine. Nothing in medicine is perfect. Anything that gets to 99% is pretty darn good. We also put out some data on the positive predictive value, or PPV, for our test, and showed that we have about a 5-fold higher performance there than the current standard. This all kind of resulted in a recent positive addition to the NCCN guidelines. We think that'll help with the adoption among doctors, but also with the payers that we're working to get coverage from. On the payer front, we had some recent successes and just got some contracts with some of the largest Blues plans in the US in Illinois, California, and Texas. And we also got a coverage policy from Geisinger Health. It's a smaller plan, but they are considered a vanguard in genomic testing, and they really lead the way in terms of adopting new procedures and genomic tests that really dramatically improve the care of patients. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Doug, to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, John. That was great. I think you and I met for the first time maybe just before we stopped traveling. I feel like this was one of my last trips. I think we had talked before that. I think we met for the first time in person maybe around that time. Again, maybe we met before, but separate from talking about
I think it was in the fall of just before the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
I remember.
So it's definitely within the last couple of years. And I remember hearing the DermTech story for the first time, maybe in advance of that, but, one way or the other, not so long ago. And thinking, wait a second, what am I missing here? Like this sort of makes almost too much sense. And why am I kind of stumbling into this company that seems to have this product that seems to be a no-brainer? And yet, it is just getting going from a commercial standpoint. So I kind of start there because, as I've looked at a lot more data over the last year and a half, and as you've generated more data, my opinion hasn't changed. I mean, this PLA is a very good product. I've talked to derms, I've talked to my derm and our KOLs. They like it. What's the pushback at this point? What do you need to overcome most in the eyes of clinicians to get them to use this test?
So I think we're making great progress with adoption, and I don't think that's our problem. Most dermatologists do see value in what we're doing. What we really want to do is drive utilization because it is a big market and there are a lot of lesions to be tested. And I think one of the things we often face is that dermatologists kind of see us as a threat. This is a big change in the way they trained. It's a big change in the paradigm of how they assess skin cancer. And so naturally, they're going to be somewhat resistant. And our goal is really to show them that we're a partner, that we're really enhancing what they're doing, and we're enabling their skills to be that much better. And the way we position the product with the dermatologist, we position in a non-threatening way. Some of the dermatologists worry that we're going to take away their biopsy business, but that's really not the case because we don't position the product that way. And what I mean by that is for every mole on a patient's body that the doctor might be worried about melanoma, that he feels like he has to get the scalpel out and do a surgical biopsy, there's another mole that's atypical that is also at risk for melanoma, but is not quite ready to be biopsied. What we do in that case is we provide them an option to treat that, to test that mole immediately. And it turns out it's in those moles where you're going to find those really early melanomas. And it's in those moles where you're going to find that melanoma at the earliest stage, because melanoma, when it's found early, has a 99% 5-year survival. And it's really our test that's required to assess that really early melanoma, because you really need to be looking at what's going on at the genomic level to really pick up accurately early melanoma. So when they understand that that's how we're positioning the product, that that's really the best use case for it, I think that's where they see through the threat that their initial reaction may be. And you'll see we've been growing our sample volumes very effectively in the last year, despite this tremendous pandemic headwind. And I think it's going to be continue. And we always ask ourselves internally, where would we be without the pandemic headwind? Because we know that this is a great product. The dermatologists who are using it see its value, and we just need to get to more of them as the pandemic subsides.
And again, probably saying the same thing you said, John, just in a more or less elegant way. But at this point, you feel pretty good based on what you're hearing that the issue isn't any pushback on data or lack thereof. It's more you need to get folks out there into physicians' offices to educate them on exactly what you described, that this isn't a threat. It's actually something that can help outcomes while certainly not hurting, if not helping health economics as they measure it within their practices.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in the early days we got pushback on the data, but at this point, I think we've conducted, 15 or more clinical studies. We've got 21 publications.
You got NCCN guidelines.
NCCN. I mean, I think the issue is not data. It's really them understanding how this fits into the pathway, how we position it. But what I would also say, as I mentioned, our vision is to really democratize dermatology care. And what we mean by that is we can allow really any healthcare practitioner and even the patient to take control of assessing skin disease and broaden the access to high quality dermatology care. And so while we're focused on the dermatologists today, and they're an important partner for us, and we will always be focused on them, we also see an opportunity to broaden into primary care, to deliver this via telemedicine. And that's really even the bigger opportunity. And that's what we're going to be doing going forward, particularly now that we're well capitalized to start to look at these efforts to broaden the access to our technology just beyond dermatologists.
John and Kevin, I mean, sometimes I hate to give away the secret sauce of an analyst or an investor, but sometimes these models that can be kind of easy to build in Excel are the neat ones. So, as I think about some of the major variables here, there's a number of docs you're going after, and you talked about potentially going after PCPs and some other adjacencies, but I think there's about 13,000 derms. So that's one variable. The second is how many tests could each derm order per year, and what's your penetration rate there? And then the third variable is price. As we think about, the 13,000 derms, I'm sure there's some sort of 80-20 rule here as well. But, how, given you guys have been making tremendous progress over the last few quarters, in spite of the pandemic, when we think about the 13,000 derms, I think you guys have talked about targeting about, 4,000 to 5,000 of them that are higher volume orderers. How far along are you in that process?
Kevin?
Yeah, so for Q3, we had reported that we had 950 unique ordering clinicians as of Q3 within the quarter, 620 during Q2, which again was affected severely by the pandemic, 900 in Q1. So post-pandemic summer, we were able to continue our growth trajectory. And then for the first 9 months of 2020, we did have 1,400 unique ordering clinicians. So we really consider the beginning of 2020 as the true full commercial launch, and that was right around the Medicare approval of the PLA. We'll report actually the number for full year in Q4 tomorrow on our earnings call. But we continue to make, it's tomorrow, yeah. So we continue to make progress.
Yeah, sorry to almost make you pre-announce.
No worries. We continue to make progress there, right? So if you just look at the Q3 numbers, we're already, a little bit more than 10% penetrated into the total 13,000 dermatology clinicians. And we're focused on the initial 4,000 to 5,000 because, as early stage commercialization, that's where we can get the biggest bang for the buck without having an overly large sales force. We can really focus on those early adopters. We can focus on the ones that have a high proportion of Medicare patients that are doing surgical procedures for melanoma. And again, we think that eventually we'll have the right sales force size to get to the right frequency to the entire 13,000. It's just we've sized our sales force right now so that we can at least have reach into the 13,000 and then the right frequency into this initial 5,000.
So Kevin, to that point, you feel like the size of the sales force is pretty close to the point it needs to be to actually get after your initial target, the 4,000 to 5,000 docs?
I'd say we're a little under what we had originally targeted, and that's mainly due to the pandemic. So access to the physicians' offices by our sales team has been limited, continues to be limited right now. We are seeing some openings back up of access, but it's certainly not to pre-pandemic levels. So our goal would be to, get somewhere between 45 and 50 is kind of a target for this stage of commercialization. And we ended 2020 with 40 sales reps. Okay. So we're continuing to kind of pause a little bit and delay because there's not a lot of benefit right now to bring those sales reps in if they can't get in and start making calls. And so where we do have benefit and access to physicians right now is the ones that are actually using our test. And so those are the offices that our sales force can get into, continue to provide data, continue to provide, feedback on how they're using it, things like that. And that is actually helping increase the utilization with those current ordering docs.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go next. Actually, doing some math on data that you actually did share on the most recent quarter. So not data that I'm trying to accidentally get you to disclose that you hadn't already. I think based on PLA sample volumes and the data you provided on number of physicians, we were getting to something like 3 tests per month. What is the possibility there? As we think about that variable in the equation, what could a physician on average order on a monthly basis?
Kevin?
So, the average number of surgical biopsies per month for melanoma is somewhere between 60 and 70. And we think that, again, we think we can penetrate a decent proportion of it. But just as a, metric to show how large the market is say we just get 10 tests per month from those physicians. That's a fairly limited penetration, and that's a wildly successful business for us. So we think we've definitely got, the right attributes of our test, the fact that it is more accurate, the fact that it minimizes patient discomfort, minimizes the risk of infection, especially for people who are anticoagulated or have wound healing concerns, or if there's, our test is being used in cosmetically sensitive areas where people really want to avoid a scar. But when you just take those kind of use cases right there, we believe that's still, call it 20, 25% of the overall total market. So we think we can certainly go beyond that. but we just haven't given, discrete kind of projections on where that we think it can go, because we think that, again, ultimately patient care is really the most important thing here. And we're talking about finding a very severe, deadly, and aggressive form of skin cancer at its earliest stages, when it is very curable. That patient care will ring out, and we should have fairly well adoption into that overall market.
So lots more practices to get into, a growing sales force that'll help you get into more of those practices, and then being in a better environment to actually have folks go into the doctor's offices to drive volumes. Those are some of the things that can drive the first two variables up, in terms of number of ordering docs, number of orders per doc. The last variable, of course, is pricing. So you have CMS reimbursement. As you mentioned, you've recently reached 3 agreements with 3 of the blues. I think it's Illinois, California, and Texas. Is there a way when you enter into non-CMS pricing agreements for you to, basically hold the line and get priced at the same level as CMS, which I think is around $760 per test? Or is there a bit more variability depending on, who the payer is and their volumes, their profiles, how tough they are at negotiating?
Yeah, it's the latter. There's definitely the variability, but our targets, our goals are to maintain that Medicare 760 price as much as possible. And so we are happy that, once we were able to provide the data that we do have, the first economic study data that we had, and then we are, commissioning a second economic study right now. But once we were able to provide the data, we were able to maintain pricing that is consistent with our targets. That, might not hold true for all payers, especially larger ones, national ones that have more leverage, but that is our targets for right now.
Okay. And then, Kevin, you and John mentioned, the possibility of moving beyond derms into PCPs. That obviously makes the market a lot bigger, at least if you kind of frame it the way I am in terms of, number of docs, how many orders can they do, and maybe, starts to reduce some friction in terms of, getting over that economic concern for the doctor. But it's a lot less concentrated. How do you go about that on the PCP side? Is that something where presumably you're not going to want to build out your own sales force right now? So ultimately, is that something where it would make more sense to partner with somebody?
Well, what we've found in the last years, we've got a lot of interest from integrated primary care networks. So those are aggregated groups of primary care physicians. They kind of exist to avoid referrals to specialists, and dermatology is a pain point for these IDNs. So we've begun to work with several of these IDNs. It's more of an institutional type sale, so it's a longer sales cycle, a lot more integration, starts out with a pilot, things like that. But we've got a lot of activity going on with some prominent networks, and we're optimistic we can get those going. And that's a concentrated way for us to get after some of the primary care opportunity. We also recently profiled we do have some primary care users today. We profiled those primary care users, and we found some unique attributes in them. Mainly, they have poor or limited access to the dermatologist. They practice a fair bit of dermatology in their daily practice, and they're familiar with genomics through their use of Exact Sciences Cologuard. So we've commissioned a study to try to identify where that profile exists in the U.S. We have a way that we can do that. And I think with a fairly targeted effort, we can begin to approach that profile of primary care. Now, going more broadly, I think you're right. We would think about potentially partnering. It would take the right partner that could sell this type of test and do it effectively. Of course, there is one example of that in our space with Exact and Pfizer, but I think those are options. But we want to prove our case out initially with the integrated primary care networks and some of these more targeted approaches.
Again, a good segue, or maybe building off of what you just described, using Exact Sciences and Cologuard as an example. I know advertising can get quite expensive, but would DermTech be a product that you feel like could benefit from more advertising, direct to consumer, build awareness with physicians, and essentially build interest that way, and then use your sales force rather than to open new accounts to basically detail and drive volumes. Is that a model? That model that worked for Cologuard, is that a model that could work well for DermTech?
It absolutely is. In fact, we started doing that about 9 months ago. It's more, we're doing it more through digital and social campaigns. And we found that they're wildly successful. Our product is clearly resonating with the patient and the consumer. The metrics that we put up are about 4 to 5 times higher than typical, 3 to 4 times higher than typical medical products. We're able actually, with a fairly targeted campaign, we're not really spending a lot yet on these things. We're driving 6,000 to 7,000 find a doctor searches a month with that effort. Those are what we're learning from that. We're also going to apply to other products and our telemedicine effort to drive patients to gain access to, for example, our Illuminate product, which is going to be a DTC LDT kind of model, where it's initiated by the patient, still prescribed by a doctor, and then we'll get at that patient through this effort, this digital consumer advertising effort, and same thing with the telemedicine. So we think there's a lot we can do there. Basically, we're having a lot of success now. We've got a great team that's involved in driving all that. And whether or not we start branching out in traditional media, we may. I wouldn't rule that out, but right now we're very happy with what we're able to do on the digital and social side.
John, I think we've talked about this a little bit, and I'm getting a question from somebody who's listening in about kind of how different cohorts of physicians, essentially how they evolve in terms of ordering patterns. Is there sort of a set path where you get somebody on board and year one they're ordering 5 PLAs a quarter, and then it goes to 10 or something like that, or is it just too early to share any cohort analysis publicly along those lines?
We've been talking about, we kind of look at 3 buckets. Folks that use just a couple a month, folks who use 3 to 9 a month, and dermatologists that use more than 10. And we definitely have been seeing a migration through those different cohorts that we look at from a metric perspective. And our 10 or more a month group has been growing, and we've been hitting, record or near record highs in that cohort over the past quarters. What we found is there's a key, when the doctors will typically start using the product, they use it in these specific use cases, right? So, they'll use it in the cosmetically sensitive area, for example, or maybe if the patient asks them, so you get what we call kind of dabblers. What will happen is that our test will find something that the doctor did not expect was actually going to come back as potentially melanoma. When they have that aha moment, that's when they begin to increase their utilization. And so we're deploying some sales tactics, which really need to be in a different, have better access to the doctor's office to deploy, but we call it the road to 100, which is we want to get doctors in 1 quarter to test about 100 lesions, all of these lesions that they would normally photograph and follow. And we know they're bound to find some high-risk lesions in that group, and that's where they'll learn that, wow, the test is really picking up things that I might not be seeing with my naked eye. And that what we believe will help drive the utilization. We've tried it with a few offices, and it's been very successful. So those are some of the tactics we're doing to get people to increase their utilization and to get them through that sort of discovery, that aha moment that I just mentioned.
John and Kevin, we're about out of time. I want to see if I could just do a lightning round of a couple late-breaking audience questions that just came in. International strategy, how are you thinking about taking PLA outside the U.S.?
Yeah, we're evaluating that right now. There's obviously certain countries that have higher prevalence of melanoma than the U.S., but we're focused on the U.S. right now just because we're early commercialization. We have multiple products in the pipeline that we'd like to kind of roll out first, but we are evaluating the strategy right now. We will disclose something at a future date once we have something more concrete.
And then the other one is on the $760 in CMS reimbursement. Is that is that per kit? Is that for 4 patches? Is it per sample? Per samples? How does that cover it? I mean, John, you talked about the example where you use 1 PLA on 1 lesion and another on another lesion. What does the $760 allow a doc to do?
Yeah, 760 is per test performed per lesion, and each lesion requires 4 patches to collect enough genomic material to run our test.
Okay, so if you wanted to do more than one lesion, that would be a separate $760 and a separate four patches.
Yeah, the Medicare approval though it does allow us to bill one lesion or one test per data service, and then in certain amount of cases a second one on the same data service is allowed. Anything beyond 2 on the same data service per patient, we need to appeal those.
Okay, understood. All right, I think I got all those. And unfortunately, we are out of time, so I'll have to leave some of the other questions for another day. Maybe tomorrow if I can free up from the conference and get on your call.
Great.
Well, we really appreciate you walking us through the story and educating us a little bit and indulging us as we kind of dug in a little bit deeper. As always, we really appreciate the time and remain excited about the outlook for all things DermTech.
Great. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.